Before the testudo became a symbol of Roman discipline, it was something simpler, darker, and more urgent. It was a way for men to keep walking when the sky itself seemed to turn against them. Imagine a column of legionaries moving toward a wall. Above them, defenders are waiting with stones, arrows, javelins, tiles, fire, and every hard object a desperate city can throw. The Romans can see the gate. They can see the battlements. They can see the distance between safety and death measured in open ground. Then the order comes. Shields rise. Shields lock. The front rank closes like a moving wall. The men behind lift their scuta overhead until the formation becomes a roof of wood, leather, iron, and nerve. The first arrows strike. Then the stones. The sound is not heroic. It is a brutal drumming, like hail on a coffin. And still, the formation moves. The testudo, the tortoise, was not a weapon in the ordinary sense. It did not cut, pierce, burn, or crush. It changed the terms of danger. It allowed exposed men to become architecture. It turned individual soldiers into a single armored organism, slow, compact, and difficult to break. For enemies who expected courage to mean a man standing uncovered before them, it was a disturbing sight, bravery hidden beneath discipline, survival made mechanical. Rome did not invent warfare, and Rome did not invent the shield. Long before Roman power spread across the Mediterranean, warriors had learned that a man with a shield could live long enough to kill a man without one. Greeks stood in phalanxes behind round hopla. Assyrians used shield-bearers to protect archers. Siege troops in many lands crept forward behind screens, mantlets, and wicker shelters. The idea of cover was old. But Rome gave cover a particular character. It drilled it into muscle. It made it portable. It made it collective. The Roman world that produced the testudo was not a world of reckless men charging blindly into glory. It was a world of roads, camps, measurements, ranks, signals, and repeated practice. A legion was terrifying not only because its soldiers were brave, but because they could be made to act as parts of a larger machine. They could dig, march, build, wait, and advance under orders when fear told every man to protect only himself. That was the true foundation of the testudo. Not the shield. The obedience. The shield most often associated with the classic Roman formation was the scutum, a large curved shield that could cover much of the body. It was not merely a symbol painted on parade. It was heavy, practical, battered by use, and built for the brutal intimacy of infantry combat. In ordinary battle, it protected a man's front. In the testudo, it became something more ambitious. The shields of the front rank formed a wall. The shields at the sides guarded the flanks. The shields overhead became a roof. One soldier's defense became another soldier's ceiling. To make that work, the men had to trust each other with their lives in a very literal way. If one shield slipped, the man beneath it might be struck. If one rank hesitated, the shape weakened. If panic spread, the tortoise opened, and the moving fortress became a crowd of frightened men trapped under falling missiles. The testudo demanded closeness, timing, and endurance. It compressed fear until there was almost no room to move. This is why the formation is usually remembered in siege warfare. A battlefield in open country required speed, flexibility, and space. A testudo could be too slow and too vulnerable to a sudden charge if used carelessly. But before a wall, under a rain of missiles, speed was not always the first requirement. Survival was. Men had to cross killing ground. They had to reach gates, towers, ditches, ladders, or siege works. They had to bring tools forward while the enemy did everything possible to make the ground between army and wall uninhabitable. Against that problem, the testudo answered with a cold Roman logic: if the open ground kills individuals, then stop moving as individuals. The ancient sources give glimpses of the formation rather than a single clean origin story. Roman writers later described it as if it were already part of the language of legionary war. Caesar's soldiers used shield cover during operations in Gaul. Later historians imagined Roman troops advancing beneath locked shields with a kind of grim admiration. The exact first day when Romans used the testudo is lost, as many decisive military habits are lost, not because they were unimportant, but because they grew from practice before they became famous. That uncertainty makes the formation more interesting, not less. It was probably not born from one brilliant speech or one dramatic invention in a single battle. It emerged from repeated encounters with the same ancient problem: men under missiles, men before walls, men needing to close distance while remaining alive. Somewhere in that pressure, Roman discipline found a shape. Picture the older way of war. A man steps forward with his shield raised, trusting his arm, his courage, and the favor of the gods. He can see the enemy. He can be seen. His honor is personal because his danger is personal. Now picture the testudo moving across the same ground. Faces vanish. Individual gestures disappear. The line becomes a block. Heroism is no longer a single man standing tall. It is 20 men lowering their heads and keeping the same pace while the shields above them shake under impact. To some enemies, this must have felt inhuman. Not because Romans lacked fear, but because fear did not immediately scatter them. Stones crashed down and the formation held. Arrows struck and skidded. Javelins stuck in shield boards. The men inside heard the blows more than they saw them. Every impact reminded them that the world outside the shield shell was hostile. Every step forward proved that discipline could bend that hostility into something survivable. The testudo was not invincible. No real formation is. It could be slowed, isolated, burned, crushed by heavy stones, disrupted by uneven ground, or attacked at close quarters. If cavalry caught it in the wrong place, or if determined infantry reached its edges, the formation could become a trap. The shield roof that protected against missiles could also limit vision and reaction. A soldier beneath it had to accept a bargain, less exposure in exchange for less freedom. Rome understood such bargains well. Roman war was full of trade-offs. A fortified camp slowed an army at the end of the day, but gave it a secure night. Heavy equipment burdened a soldier on the march, but made him harder to break in battle. Roads required labor, but moved legions faster than enemies expected. The testudo belonged to the same mental world. It sacrificed speed and individual range for collective protection at the exact moment protection mattered most. Behind the formation stood a whole system of preparation. Shields had to be maintained. Straps had to hold. Helmets, armor, and weapons had to be carried into position. Officers had to give commands that could be heard through noise and fear. Men had to know where their shield belonged before the missiles started falling. What looked like a sudden transformation on the battlefield was really the visible result of training repeated until obedience became instinct. That is the part easy to miss when looking at a dramatic image of the testudo. The formation was not only a shape. It was a culture of drilling men to become dependable under pressure. It required a soldier to believe that the man beside him would not flinch, and to know that his own flinching could kill someone else. In that way, the testudo was a moral technology as much as a military one. It enforced the idea that survival depended on mutual discipline. Now imagine the defenders on the wall. They have height. They have cover. They have baskets of stones, bundles of javelins, and the confidence that attackers must suffer before reaching them. At first, the usual methods begin. Missiles fall. A man in the open would stagger or drop. A loose group would scatter. But the Romans below are not loose. They have folded themselves into a moving roof. The defenders throw harder. They aim for gaps. They search for a weakness in the shell. There are always gaps. There are always moments when wood shifts, when a shield edge dips, when a soldier stumbles on broken ground. The testudo was not magic. Men inside it could be wounded. They could be terrified. A heavy stone landing squarely on a shield could drive pain through the arm beneath it. Dust would rise. Breath would become hot and close. The formation's strength came from continuing anyway. That continuation was the psychological blow. The enemy did not simply see Romans protected. He saw Romans absorbing what should have stopped them. The defenders' confidence depended on the idea that the space before the wall belonged to them. The testudo contested that ownership. It turned the dead zone into a corridor. For a commander, this was priceless. Battles and sieges are full of moments when men must do something unnatural, advance toward danger, stand still under pressure, hold formation when instinct begs for flight. The testudo gave commanders a tool for one of those moments. It allowed a unit to approach, to cover engineers, to protect men working at a gate, or to survive long enough for another action to happen. It did not win every battle by itself. Few things do. But it made possible actions that otherwise would have dissolved under missile fire. The image became powerful because it captured Rome's deepest military identity. The empire was not built only by generals with grand ambitions. It was built by thousands of anonymous soldiers doing difficult, repetitive, dangerous things in order. They dug trenches around cities. They raised ramps. They marched through rain. They guarded bridges. They built roads across hostile ground. They stood in lines and obeyed commands while other men tried to break their nerve. The testudo compressed all of that into one unforgettable form. A tortoise is not a fast animal. It survives by carrying its defense with it. The Roman name was almost too perfect. The formation was slow, stubborn, and armored. It accepted danger without pretending danger did not exist. It did not answer missiles with panic, or even with immediate violence. It answered with endurance. Yet endurance has a darker side. The testudo also shows how war rewards the suppression of the individual. Inside the formation, a soldier's fear mattered less than the shape he was required to maintain. His face disappeared behind the shield. His choices narrowed to step, hold, breathe, step again. The same discipline that made Roman armies formidable also demanded that men surrender parts of themselves to the unit. In the Roman imagination, that surrender was strength. To the man beneath the shield roof, it may have felt like being buried alive in motion. There is no need to exaggerate the formation into legend. It was not a universal answer. It was not a metal tank before tanks. It was human bodies under wood and leather, vulnerable to bad terrain, bad timing, and bad luck. But its importance lies in the principle it made visible. The future of war would belong again and again to forces that could protect movement through danger. Shields, armor, siege towers, trenches, armored vehicles, and modern infantry tactics all answer versions of the same question: how do men cross ground that the enemy has turned into death? The testudo was one ancient answer, elegant because it used what the soldiers already carried. No great engine had to be dragged forward. No rare material had to be discovered. The weapon was organization. The armor was cooperation. The innovation was not a single object, but a way of arranging men so that ordinary shields became a temporary fortress. That may be why the formation remains so memorable. It gives shape to an idea larger than Rome. Human beings are fragile alone. Under pressure, they look for ways to combine. A wall is stronger than a stone. A legion is stronger than a crowd. A testudo is stronger than a line of men who each protect only themselves. On the day Romans first raised shields into that shell, whoever they were, wherever the order was first given, something important happened. The battlefield became less a contest of isolated bravery and more a contest of systems. The old world of visible heroism did not vanish, but it had to make room for a colder kind of courage, the courage to disappear into formation and trust the group more than the self. That courage could look almost silent from a distance. A dark block moving forward. Shields above. Shields before. Arrows falling and failing to stop it. No single warrior at the center. No glorious duel. Just disciplined men making fear share the same roof. Rome's enemies learned that this was part of the empire's power. Not invulnerability. Not genius in every commander. Not victory in every campaign. But the repeated ability to turn discipline into a physical fact on the ground. A road. A camp. A wall. A formation. A tortoise moving beneath a storm. The Testudo endured in memory because it looks like an answer carved from necessity. It tells us that history is often changed not by the loudest weapon, but by the method that lets men survive long enough to use every other weapon. A sword cannot matter if the soldier carrying it dies before reaching the wall. A ladder cannot matter if the men bringing it forward are broken in the open. Courage cannot matter if it burns out alone. So the Romans raised their shields and made courage collective. That is the real force of the Testudo. It was not merely a formation. It was a statement about what Rome expected from its soldiers, and what those soldiers could become under command. In the shadow of a wall, under a hard rain of arrows and stone, the individual man became part of something heavier than fear. And for a few terrible minutes, as the missiles struck and the shield roof held, the battlefield saw a new kind of power advancing through the dust, not speed, not fury, not heroic display, but disciplined survival, moving one step at a time toward the wall.